Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Now, about 6 months ago I did a video on my progress so far with the Associated B7, and that video has been surprisingly popular, so I thought I'd do another one. The original video was mostly about my outdoor season, running mostly on AstroTurf, and for the last 6 months I've been running indoors on carpet. So I thought I'd share a few thoughts, a few tips about how to get this car going the way you want it to go when you're racing on carpet. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer here. Bear in mind, I have never claimed to be a particularly outstanding driver. I have been doing this for quite a long time. I'm still pretty average, and I'm pretty confident it's not the car that's holding me back. It's my skills, but I've certainly managed to get this car going the way that I want it to, and hopefully you can pick up a few tips from that. Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about is durability. When the B7 was released, there was a lot of complaints really online about durability. And the thing about going online is that one person's voice can get really amplified if they're not happy about the way that a car performs. So I think it's always worthwhile putting out a slightly different perspective on the durability of the car. Now, if you'd watched the previous video, I probably mentioned that when I was racing outdoors, I did do the classic bit of damage to the rear hinge pin mount here, where in a big crash you can pull the wishbone out, pull the pin out, and destroy the aluminium arm mount here. And I did that because of a really big crash, which should have broken the car anyway. I replaced it at the time with the original part again, which still has the notch in it. And this piece has been on the car now for a year with more than its fair share of crashes. And you know what? No damage whatsoever. It's proven very reliable. The next thing that people like to complain about is the idler gears. Now, this is a 5-gear transmission in the B7. And again, there's been a big aftermarket in different idler gears made out of different materials or with a slightly different design for the bearings. I race modified with this car. This is a 6.5 turn motor with boost and turbo, and I still have the original gears in here, and I've not had a single issue with the gears inside the transmission of this buggy. So the only other areas where I've had any issues with durability, and again it's really down to my driving, is I once had a big crash indoors where I went into the back of a jump, so it was basically just vertical wooden part of a jump, hit that hard, bent the inner hinge pin, didn't break the wishbone, managed to finish the race, didn't break the aluminium bulkhead here. I couldn't get it apart at the track because once that hinge pin is bent, nothing's going to come apart. I do have my dirt car spare, the car that's set up for wet conditions outdoors. So I just transferred the parts across from that on the front end, took it home, quite a lot of effort with center punches and so on to see if I could get the pin out without breaking other parts. I couldn't. I actually had to cut the wishbone in half to get the wishbone off and then get the pin out. And basically all I needed to do was find a new front wishbone and a new hinge pin, still running the original aluminium bulkhead, still running all the other original parts. Again, another one of those instances where I made a mistake. Any car would have broken in that situation. But other than that, the car really has been incredibly durable. I do make mistakes. I wish I made fewer of them. But really, the number of times I've hit something and ended up on my roof or off the track and managed to continue on after just being put onto my wheels again has been quite remarkable, really, and really pleasing. Next thing I want to talk about is tyres. Now, tyres are extremely important, really, in all forms of racing, but especially in two-wheel drive buggy racing. And it's been quite an interesting year, quite an interesting season for tyres. Here in the UK, we're pretty much almost exclusively using Schumacher tyres. And there's been a few new releases that we've had to think about. So if we were to cast our minds back a little over a year, Schumacher introduced this tyre for the front, which was the Fusion Slim. And this is the Fusion Slim mounted as normal. It has the reversed sidewall that is familiar from the cut stagger tyre that's very commonly used outdoors. And also there was a number of people that were choosing to glue down the Fusion Slim, which is easiest to do when you've got a jig, and that just takes away the reversed sidewall and makes the tyre much more aggressive. And on the rear, the standard choice was the Cactus tyre, which has been around for a few years. And this is one that is full spikes, so you can possibly just about tell that I haven't trimmed off the outer spikes On this one, it has had a few runs on it, but I haven't trimmed it. And another thing that you'll see that a lot of drivers do, particularly common among the sort of the very top drivers, is that they will trim the outer row of spikes off a cactus. So you just have those middle spikes as well. So they were your standard choices a year ago for tyres. But at the start of the indoor season, and in fact during the outdoor season, Schumacher released some new tyres in 2024. The first one was the Splinter for the front. Now, the Splinter does not have a reversed sidewall. It is more like the American tyres with a more conventional sidewall. This is one mounted standard with no insert inside it. And this is one that you can possibly just about tell I've run some glue on the sidewall. I did a separate video about gluing tyres, and with these I find that the glue needs to go up to this wavy line for it to start to have any effect. Supergluing the sidewall takes away a bit of bite from the tyre, makes it a bit easier to drive in high grip conditions. And for the rear, they introduced this tyre, the Azami, which is intended to be a low wear, long life tyre. And I think this one's had a bit of an awkward introduction to the market. So one thing that I think is quite interesting about it is that they've actually shaped it so that there aren't any of the outer spikes on the sidewall. So it's more like a trimmed cactus in that respect. And they've increased the density of the spikes in the middle of the tyre, and that's probably intended to make it more durable. But one thing that is hard to tell when you look at the tyre, but it's very clear when you have it in your hand, is that the carcass of the Azami is much, much, much softer than the carcass of the cactus. And what that seems to do is it does allow these small spikes to kind of fold over a lot. And the outcome of that really is that fundamentally the Azami has less grip, which is less lap time. Because the outer spikes have been removed, it tends to have less side bite around the corners. So rather like a trimmed cactus, it will slide out a bit more mid-corner. I personally don't run trimmed cactuses. I prefer the full cactus. I know I'm maybe in the minority, but I like the way that it is more secure through the middle of the corner. It suits my driving style better. I don't really like the car to kick out in the middle of the corner. So the Azami has got less grip all round. However, having spent some time working with it, it doesn't really last that long either. Now, it may superficially look like this isn't particularly worn, but it's already started to lose lap time. And it's one of those tyres where it doesn't, despite not being worn out, it doesn't seem to have a particularly long life either in terms of peak performance. So I think we've seen that during the course of the season. I think a lot of people, I believe the ETS as well, the EOS, European Off-Road Series, went back to the cactus, but most people are combining the cactus with the Splinter. And my preferred setup myself is the full cactus with the unglued Splinter. That seems to give the best outcome. The unglued Splinter probably sits somewhere between a glued down Fusion Slim and a standard Fusion Slim in grip, which is pretty much the right balance and a balance overall that I'm very happy with and have been using for the bulk of the season. One small downside, though, it seems, with the Splinter is that it isn't the most durable front tyre. It seems to me to be a little bit less durable than the Fusion Slim. The Fusion Slim would give me 2 solid race meetings of performance and maybe start to tail off in the third. With the Splinter, I'm finding it gives probably on the carpet 1 solid race meeting of good performance, then it's tailing off in the second, which is a little bit less lifespan than I would like personally. I don't really like to have new tyres every race meeting, quite expensive to be honest. And equally with the cactuses, because I run them full, I tend to get, again, sort of 2 solid race meetings out of a set, and maybe in the third they would start tailing off. I believe that people that end up trimming their cactuses don't get long life out of them. I think that the top people often are putting 2 sets on per race meeting. Not something, again, that I want to do. I'm quite happy with a 1 set for every 2 meetings. So possibly next year I might even go back to the Fusion Slim and just see if I can get that extra bit of a lifespan and not lose too much performance. So just give a quick overview of the main changes I make when going from outdoor AstroTurf to indoor carpet tracks. So the main characteristic of an indoor carpet track is higher grip and a smoother surface. And so the main thing that you would do to a modern buggy like this, which has adjustable hub height, is just to raise the hubs effectively. And I just use that with 2mm spacers. So on the front end, we have the caster bushings here, sort of the top hat pieces, and I just move those to the +2 position. And then on the rear end, I just switch across to the plastic high roll center hubs, which again is 2mm higher on the hub. So that instantly gives you 2mm less of ride height on the same settings, and obviously has a small impact on the same impact on droop and other things like that. And that I find is a really good starting point for running on carpet. And that brings the ride height down, because the carpet tyres are slightly smaller diameter than the outdoors tyres. Brings the ride height down to about 13mm all round, and that's where I tend to run it. The other main change I make on the switch from outdoor dry AstroTurf to indoor carpet is on the springs, where I go up roughly 1 grade all round. So currently I'm running the orange front springs on this and the yellow rear springs, whereas outdoors on dry Astro I'd probably be running the red front springs and the blue rear springs. I play around with front springs and rear springs sometimes a little bit, so I might sometimes go up to the purple, and certainly sometimes I change the damping at the front end as well. I tend to flip between 400 or 450 or oil in the dampers, and again that's really just a feel thing. So that the stiffer spring will give you, generally speaking, less steering overall. Also tends to make the car just jump a little bit more nose up. The stiffer damping tends to just smooth the front end out a little bit. So depending on the track layout or depending on the grip levels, I might just play around with front spring or front damping to get the right feel. I don't tend to mess around much with the geometry once I've set it up. I know that some people do like to change spacers and so on to change the roll center. It's not something that I've ever really found has enough of a difference, or at least a predictable enough difference for me to bother doing when I do settings. The only geometry change that I would tend to do is a much simpler one, which is on the rear, and which is the rear toe in. So I'm currently got this at 1 degree rear toe in. I have at times during the season been running 2 degrees of rear toe in. And again, that's another thing that just gives you more feel. The less toe in you have, the more steering you have, basically all the way around the track. You tend to notice it particularly on power. Less rear toe in will tend to mean that the car will sort of keep a tighter line on power as you accelerate out of the corners. In fact, the main area that I've been experimenting with during the course of the season has been with the front hubs, and in particular the KPI adjustment. Now, you might have noticed already this isn't running the standard B7 hubs. This is currently running the older hubs from the B6.1. And you'll have seen that a lot of the team drivers have been messing around with B6.1 hubs as well, in most conditions, in fact. So I'm not the only person that's been messing around with it. The B7 hubs have 2mm of KPI as standard, so that's a 2mm offset between the top and bottom mounting points for the steering upright, and you can set it to either 1 or 3 if you want to, but there's no 0 KPI option with B7 parts, so you have to go back to either these B6.1 parts or alternatively B6.4 parts, which have a slightly different geometry. My understanding is that the B6.1 parts are a little closer to the B7 geometry, so you have fewer kind of compromises elsewhere. It makes it easier to be swapped across. It's not a 100% straight swap. You still need to redo the lengths of your links a little bit just to make sure that your camber and your toe in is still correct. But it is a fairly straightforward change. All you need is the plastic parts for the B6.1, and I'll pop the part number at the bottom of the video now. And also you will need to have some slightly shorter screws. The B7 uses a 16mm screw and a 14mm, and for the B6.1 you need 14mm in both, otherwise it binds up the bearing. But it's a pretty straightforward change to make, and it's a change that for me has actually quite a nice outcome. So it's very much an outcome of feel rather than raw lap time. I find that with the B6.1 hubs with the 0 KPI, you get a sharper feel on turn-in. you get a kind of a smoother exit, so it kind of comes off the steering a bit smoother. It doesn't get caught in the corner so much, and you have slightly less mid-corner, which for me is kind of the balance that I like. I like the car to come off the corner quite confidently. I like it to turn in quite sharply, and kind of that slight decrease in mid-corner you can always make up for with other changes, you know, such as the front spring, maybe the front damping, the rear towing, like I mentioned beforehand. So this is a change that I've flitted between B7 and B6.1 parts for most of the last 6 months. Certainly at the end of the AstroTurf season, I was also switching between the two to try and get an idea about which ones I prefer. I've now settled on the B6.1. I just think this is a better setup for the car all the way around. And the last thing that I've played around with a bit during the indoor season is the rear differential. And I know that a lot of people, and again, a lot of the team drivers, really favour very heavy oils in the rear differential these days, like 100,000 weight, almost locking the rear differential up. It's something, again, that I've experimented with, and I'm just not comfortable with that kind of very, very heavy rear diff with my style of driving. I like the car to roll through the corner, and I find that the heavy rear diff takes away a lot of steering. Maybe it gives you something a bit more positive on exit, but again, for my driving style, it's not worth the loss of that kind of flow through the middle of the corner. So again, I'm sticking to, I believe it's 10,000 weight, maybe 20,000 weight is what I work at with 4 gears in the differential. I'm not using these very, very heavy weights, just something that doesn't work for me. So that's a quick summary of how I've found the Associated B7 during the carpet season, during its first full carpet season. I'm in a pretty happy place with the car now. I've kind of worked through a lot of the things I wanted to work through. Haven't been making a lot of changes in the latter part of the season. Really just being able to try and focus on my driving and enjoying a good day out and a good bit of racing on track as well. So hopefully you found this video useful. If you've got any questions or any comments, please do leave them below. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked the like button. And if you like more of the videos that we do on this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you were to subscribe to the channel, because that does help me out. As ever, thank you very much for watching.